Kia ora koutou katoa. Right, we're back to the substantive. Don't think we need any more discussion on I think we covered the additional, they're not amendments, they are Chair's recommendations that came after the agenda. Those have all been sent around. I think everyone's comfortable on that. I'll just lead off, and then I don't have any speakers yet, but I'm sure they might come up. Am I waiting for 1, 2, 3?
You've got a quorum.
Okay, got a quorum. Cool. Okay.
Take the vote now before they come back.
No. I just want to firstly say, once again, thank you to the staff for a phenomenal amount of work, both at the draft stage, but also reformatting, changing based on feedback, and the significant amount of work and consultation and thought that has gone through this process. The process that was directed by us when we chose those strategic outcomes that we wanted to see through the future development strategy. Obviously, over time, some of the outcomes became more serious. In between the preparation of the draft and going out to consultation, we did have the floods, Cyclone Gabrielle, which further directed our thoughts to preventing as much as we can legally the development of housing in floodplains or flood-prone areas. So we did request that in February. We did request this work continue across all our plans, and this is one first major one that has come before us that has included such a significant change in our direction when we're looking at the future development in those flood-prone or floodplain areas. The plan itself has significant improvements for Māori, for our treaty obligations, for the environment, for climate. It does include a lot of capacity for housing, both in the brownfields and the greenfield areas. It does start to try and match where the consents are currently coming from, where we're seeing, even though we do have a lot of live zone land, it isn't being picked up at the rate of knots that we thought it would. But because of the unitary plan and the Auckland plan and things that have come before, and I guess the market, the people are acquiring and wanting to live close to amenities. They are wanting to live close to public transport. They're wanting to live close to the current parks and services and things that, family, their family, whether it's older or younger, they're wanting to live close. We are seeing the changing nature of our city already play out in front of us. I think of Northcote in our own ward. It's the change coming through there, the thousands of extra dwellings that people are choosing to buy into because there are good parks, good connections to public transport, education in the right place, and of course housing options for people at in their older years. They might have wanted to move out of the family home, and younger years maybe before, some of those people may choose to have children in the future and change the type of housing that they live in. They may not, they may like the type of housing that they've chosen. But we have seen those infrastructure strategies, the funding from both private development, council and the government in some of those focus areas, and we talk about those focus areas in the future development strategy. Where we have been able to focus that infrastructure at the same time as housing, we're seeing fantastic outcomes. But the problem has been we have not been able to spread that money far enough right across our city, and there is an inequity in the way we've been building. The fact is, this is an honest plan about what we can afford. This plan shows that we must use the money and the budget and the decisions we do have to focus in certain areas. The plan changes, the private plan changes will still come, as they always have, and change the direction of our plan, but we are putting a line in the sand around flooding, and we are putting a line in the sand around that infrastructure. We cannot continue to tell our communities that yes, you can live there, and eventually we will get the water infrastructure, the roading infrastructure, the community infrastructure and parks there. We know that our city is full of new subdivisions that are sitting in traffic every morning, do not have access to good facilities like many of our communities have, because we're trying to spread that dollar further and further and further. So there are opportunities, and we have worked with the development community to have triggers in there. There are opportunities for them to come forward if there are new funding options, or they're willing to pay a far larger amount of that infrastructure needed. But at the moment, we're looking to pull back in certain areas, but also make sure we have a lot of capacity, which we've seen, there are still millions of capacity for housing across our city. I think this is a bold plan, but to some, as we saw through the submissions, it is actually didn't go far enough. It is still allowing, greenfield development. It's still allowing some sprawl of our city, but what it is doing is showing the direction we want to head, which is protecting people from those hazards and protecting, I guess, the ratepayer and the future of our communities so we can focus our development better and make sure we're creating those communities and our city that is fair for everyone and so they can have access to the great assets, the great parks, and the great things that we expect as part of a good city. So I hope that you can all, after the long, long process we've gone to get here, can support this direction. There will be other plans that come out of this that will have more debate. There will be government policy changes that we will debate, but right now, this is our line in the sand. This is our piece of paper to show what we believe in and what is important to our city, and it is based on the recommendations we've had going backwards to get here today. So I just want to thank you all for the process, the opportunities, the interest, and all the questions you've had of me and of staff to get this good information, because it is really important for our city that we are focused on their future today. So kia ora. Deputy Chair.
Oh, thank you, Chair. The questions that have been asked this morning and this afternoon have given a lot of time to the development community and the incoming government. I'd like to spend my speaking time to remind us of who Councillor Lee fondly calls ordinary Aucklanders and what they said in their feedback to the consultation. But first of all, let's just have a reminder of a couple of key points, changes that we all agreed to as part of the updated strategy. And they were a stronger focus on responding to climate change, particularly flooding hazards and protecting people and property, and a greater recognition of the Council's financial challenges and when it can invest in infrastructure and services, especially in greenfields. I think the key comment about that is when, not to do it, but when to do it. Now, in recent weeks, we have received emails from the developer community, and we've accepted their further feedback, and as you can see from the track change final FDS document, there's been plenty of changes made to accommodate some of their feedback. Ordinary Aucklanders have not had that same luxury. They went through the submission process only, and here is a reminder of what they said. Of the 10,000 submissions received, a total of 8,552 were individual submissions. 80% supported our approach to avoiding further growth in areas which are exposed to significant risk of environmental hazards. And the most common reasons were protecting people and property and avoiding the monetary costs in making these areas safe to live in. 66% of individuals supported focusing most of the city's future housing and business growth within existing urban areas. And reasons included that this would make public transport more viable and efficient, protect rural areas and high productive food growing land, and that it's better for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving wellbeing and quality of life. Additionally, it was supported as the most cost-effective approach for growth, allowing for the use of existing infrastructure that is already in place, with concerns raised about the cost of building and maintaining new infrastructure in the city's edges. And when it comes to council's costs around the infrastructure, the developers can invest, they can put in the infrastructure, but we still need to maintain that. So regardless of who pays the upfront cost, we need to look at the cost of continually maintaining those roads and other parts of infrastructure that we do not have budgeted nor the ability to fund. 74% from 8,439 individuals supported focusing development near local centres where people can easily access jobs, shops, schools and social activities by walking, cycling and public transport. Of the 21 local boards, 20 local boards supported the direction of the future development strategy. I'd like to once again appreciate the work done by Jacques and the team, particularly the time that they spent going out to additional meetings, and thank you, coming out south a couple of times and facing some pretty tough meetings. I really, really appreciated it. And also, you've sat down with some of the developers and done a lot of work in that space as well to ensure that they were heard. So the changes in the proposed strategy from where we started to where we have landed evidences the willingness to find that balance while enabling plenty of housing capacity and upholding the principles important to Aucklanders who were affected by the anniversary day floods and Cyclone Gabrielle. For those who are not directly impacted but hold an anxiety for the future. Aucklanders are cognizant of our limited ability to invest in infrastructure for unplanned development, and they have spoken. They have spoken loudly. I was intrigued by, we always get the demographics, and generally we're getting the 80% European demographic back. This time we had 45%, I think it's the lowest. But interestingly, those that we received an over-representation from were our Asian community at 25% and our Pacifica community at 13%. So we did get diversity of views through the submission, interest of views, people who are affected and who might be affected in the future. So it will be, I just wanted to have a pitch for ordinary Aucklanders and amongst all of the noise of everything else that is going on. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Deputy Chair, and thank you for all your work on this. It's been a mammoth task, but I appreciate it. Councillor Watson.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. The first is to really support the focus on some of the areas that were prone to flooding, and that has proven to be a reasonably timely response to a long-standing problem. Similarly with belated resistance to council being landed with significant parts of infrastructure costs that more so now than ever are not sustainable, and there's a number of reasons for that. From my own ward, and this is it's an important consideration for big parts of our community, is certainly in places like Whenuapai, hopefully the ability to arrest this trend for ad hoc plan changes and the consequences of the fast track legislation of the last government, which has proven to be totally counterproductive to any sense of planning regime, and we sort of seen that right across from Orewa to Whenuapai and everywhere in between in the Albany ward. I guess the point I did want to make up, Mr. Chair, is that through this process there has been some very useful information that's come through in the submissions. Certainly for me, the overriding concern is how all these strategies and plans actually affect affordability, because we've been hearing that for any number of years now, how all this is going to lead to more affordable homes. Or some of the submitters who are involved really at the coal face of all this have shown that in the brownfield sites, for instance, the costs are far more extensive. So you 2 to 3 times the cost in providing infrastructure, construction costs 2 to 2.5 times, and add that to inner city urban land. So the notion that somehow apartments will provide affordability, particularly with the current interest rates and construction costs since the 2016 unitary plan, that just simply hasn't occurred. They've gone up just as much, and they're as far away from most people on medium and low incomes. And I guess, Mr. Chair, really the key point in all that seems to be studiously ignored by governments in particular is the manner in which the low-cost housing support from the government fell off the cliff in 1994. So whereas in the 60s, the 70s, and even a large part of the 80s, or start of the 80s anyway, there was significant aid to low cost housing, not low quality. These were all well-built homes. They were low cost, where people on low and medium incomes. That went down from, in 2017 values, billions of dollars, down to virtually nothing in 1994. And it has made no real recovery since. It stayed just marginally above the margin of error for that. And that remains unaddressed by all the planning, all the documentation such as this. In actual fact, if we draw the distinction between brownfield and greenfield, Birkdale, Beach Haven, big chunks of the North Shore, Glenfield were greenfield developments in the 70s, 60s, 70s and 80s, and they were largely populated by people who could capitalise on their family benefit or had government loans that were half the market interest rate. I don't see any evidence of that with successive governments, and until there's a fundamental change to the approach of the government and getting and building more low-cost homes that New Zealand did very successful, Manurewa, Papakura, during that Helicon eras of the 60s and 70s, we perpetuate the myth, in my view, that somehow the development strategies and intensification and brownfield development will suddenly open up to the low-cost medium households. It's not. It's as far away now as ever. So my view is, Mr. Chair, in concluding, is that there are some very positive elements to this strategy, but from my own perspective, that fundamental gulf between New Zealand in the 70s and the 60s, where there was significant government support to low and medium cost householders, until that's addressed, it's a little bit of a game of make-believe as far as affordability goes. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to acknowledge the speakers that have had their kōrero before me. And the interesting thing, and I haven't got that much to say because the three speakers have covered a lot of what I wanted to say. What I do, however, just wanted to let Councillor Watson know that I totally agree around the low-cost housing in the 70s and 60s, Councillor Watson, because that's how we ended up moving to Mangere in 1960 and ended up getting our first home, which we still have, in 1961. So I totally agree with those points. Chair and the committee and in particular the staff have been acknowledged, so I just took all that. But Chair, I definitely support what you'd said and also the others, that it's around supporting Auckland, the development of Auckland. I will be supporting these recommendations, and I want to see how many others around our table support Auckland. So I will call for division. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't get the feedback from the community in the same percentages as I saw in the feedback we were given here. When what people see as being the truth, what they're told is the truth, is so disconnected, it's very unsettling. Everyone that I talk to in my ward or who engage with me on these subjects just want to stop infill housing. They just want to keep the numbers down. The words, you know, I pour through all this stuff, that word brownfield development really means intensification. Then the policies that have, the people are feeling the result of policies right now, and whether it's Te Atatu, Henderson, Glen Eden, Te Atatu Peninsula in particular, people are saying to me, enough's enough. We don't want any more infill housing. We talk about the infrastructure, but things like Te Atatu Peninsula, just the infrastructure to get on and off, whether you're in a bus or a car, is constrained terribly. I'm just here, I promise, to bring their voices to this table. You know, it's not just the people, you know, in their homes and stuff. Down the concourse, I've been down the concourse twice from KW Road Hall to the generator rental services company to Stankovic's at Waitakere Scrap Metal. They're all telling me we're now taking an hour to get out of this one dead-end street. Some of them there are now taking over an hour and a half to get from that street to Te Atapatu, just down the motorway. So I'm going to vote against this because I know no better way to bring the people's voice to the table as they have asked me to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baker.
Yeah, so look, my opposition to this was well known at the start. I voted against it at the start, and I've maintained a pretty sceptical view of the FDS over time, and I will be supporting this, however. And this morning we had some discussions, and my concerns were twofold, really. The first one is in regards to we were forgetting about the planning decisions of the past, and where we have created dormitory suburbs in Auckland, and where unless we do something, unless we allow development that is appropriate and with merit, we will continue to have people driving, the vast majority of that population driving from those suburbs to work, because we've allowed that. Well, not particularly us, but previous councils have allowed that. And so we have to basically look at those areas and come up with a way in which we can leverage change to create employment, to stop people. If we're going to reduce vehicle kilometres travelled, we actually have to create the things to stop them travelling. They'll always have to travel for work. They'll always have to travel for school, unless there is the ability to have those things in those areas. And so I really do want to and thank for the A1, because it's incredibly important for the areas outside of urban Auckland, and this plan was all about urban Auckland, but I felt at the start it was at the expense of rural Auckland. And there are some rural towns that are 12,000 people now. Pukekohe's close to 30,000 people. They are not rural towns. They are bigger than some towns across the country. They are bigger than some district councils across the country. And so we've actually got to look at these places as being part of the wider Auckland. I'm not, it must be the old policeman in me, I'm not a huge fan of the mass intensification. And I remember being a policeman in a part of Auckland in the 1980s where they were putting in long driveways with 3 houses off them and intensifying like we'd never seen before. And the fear was, as we were driving around as policemen in that area, going, my God, the social outcomes in this area is going to be terrible. And I still have that fear as we intensify, as the social outcomes that will come. Auckland has always been known, and if you stand on level 26 and walk around that building and look out the windows and see what a beautiful place Auckland is. We've got a harbour, we've got the ranges, we've got, there's trees everywhere. It is a beautiful place to look and to see. And the thing about it is we've always had choice for housing. People can choose what sort of lifestyle they want. And I hate the social engineering that goes on, is that you're all going to live in apartments and you're all going to live here. I support around the transport nodes. I think that's the best idea. But at the end of the day too, I think we're a very young city worldwide, but we are creating our heritage. We have to find ways of protecting that as we grow older. We have to find ways to protect that everybody wants to live in a different way. Not everyone wants to live in an apartment in the city. Some people do like their little leafy green suburbs. How do we protect that? We have to be careful we don't get pigeonholed into a way of thinking that ends up with bad social outcomes and turns Auckland away from what it is, which is a beautiful city, and I can't believe I've ever said that coming from the south. But it is a beautiful city, and it's a great place to live, and we've got to maintain the choice. So I'll be supporting this because I think it's as good as we're going to get in this instance. And so little furry rat, it's a mouse, will swallow it. But, the end of the day, for those rural communities where we've started it, it's like baking a cake, and you can tell I like a cake. You never open the oven until it's finished because it'll collapse. So we've started it. We can't stop halfway and stop it now. We actually need to just continue, but do it in a right way and make sure that we've got it right.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you very much. Councillor Henderson.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, yeah, I'll be supporting it today because, you know, the long and short of it is, I think that while this doesn't go far enough, in my view, and that probably isn't a surprise to colleagues, I think that it does have many good elements with it. Look, I'm not ever going to advocate that we build in things like floodplains and things like that. I think instead that we should be looking at compensating our housing supply, that when we do have to restrict our housing away from floodplains and these sort of situations, we make a really clear statement that we're going to provide it elsewhere and in greater number and in places that are closer to work, study and public transport. But like, Chair, I'm so sick of these discussions, eh? Like, I really am. This is like, I don't know, maybe at least the 10th time I've had to defend housing as a human right at this table, right? Isn't that insane that we still have a housing crisis? We still have people that are really struggling and doing it tough. We still have, in my view, a planning crisis where people are sitting in traffic and away from their families in sort of unacceptable numbers. We have an air pollution crisis. We have a climate crisis. All of these things lead us to one conclusion, that is smart planning solutions where we're enabling housing closer to work, closer to study, close to public transport, close to the city centre, right? And, you know, I'm trying not to be sort of grumpy about it, but I do need to point out, look, I live, as many people know, I live in an intensified housing development and I find it bloody great. It's absolutely awesome. I was interrupted earlier by one of my neighbours who mows the entire development's berms. We never asked him to do it. He never gets paid for it or anything like that. He just does it because he really loves the community and we have a good yarn and all that kind of stuff. This is the kind of place that I live in, right? It's kind of like a white picket fencey 50s style idyllic place where everyone knows our neighbours, the kids grow up together, we all live in townhouses, right? And to hear things about how horrible townhouses are and how we shouldn't be providing this style of living, I just kind of, to be honest, man, I do find it appalling. You know, people need places to live, and this is a really great style of living, I'd say. Just briefly, I'd say, look, I wish to thank, I don't always want to single people out, but I want to thank my ward mate for his contribution, which I think had many sound points. But I do draw different conclusions, and I'll just briefly explain why. Because, you know, I represent places like Te Atu Peninsula, Glen Eden, you all know this kind of stuff, where they've taken on huge amounts of housing intensification. And people have, you know, had yarns about this to me all the time. I hear it all the time. People never say, like, we want to stop housing. We don't want people to live here in greater number. They just want the investment that they are due for taking on the growth, right? And this is exactly why I asked that question earlier around the FDS. I wish that we had this framework in place earlier, where places that have already taken a lot of growth and got nothing from this council in return, you know, they're going to be asking me tomorrow, well, what about us, right? So this is not the fourth time that we're adopting this kind of situation. I do wish to thank Member Ashby and Member Henare for their contributions as well. I was going to mention it too, but, you know, I think it is appropriate that you've kind of called that out, that, you know, there's overwhelming support to this, right? And I do wonder what the difference is between this and last week. I really do. So I look forward to the contributions of others that might want to explain that one to me a bit. You know, so I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of this, but I will be supporting it. And, you know, I thank everyone for their hard work on this. It's been a long road to hoe, 6 workshops. Let's pass it. Let's get it on. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Let's get it on. Quite like, it's a song. Member Ashby.
I don't know how to follow up after that. Kia ora. Yeah, look, similar to Andy, sorry, Councillor Baker. You know, it's been a bit of a tightrope to walk here, but ultimately we think we've landed in a good place. From a Māori point of view, a lot of the submissions, of course, are trying to balance protecting the environment avoiding hazards and flooding and ensuring that there's adequate infrastructure, because this has been through the unitary plan hearings for the last 10 plus, actually 50 plus years, this has been the issue. The other side of that is, of course, the economic deprivation of iwi and Māori generally, not having enough skin in the game of this city. And so through the work we've done, that's why we're getting, it's not perfect, but it's in a place where I'm comfortable that it strikes the right balance between those two poles. And so that's why I'm going to be supporting this. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Member Ashby. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Yeah, I do want to acknowledge the staff. This has been a long haul, kicked off when I was planning committee chair, and I probably did the light lifting, and chair and deputy chair of this committee have done the heavy lifting, so I really do want to acknowledge you as chair and deputy. This is most people, it's not visible to even the members here. A lot of heavy lifting is done by the chair and the deputy chair, particularly on this. It's been challenging, but I think we're landing a good outcome. So to Jacques and Claire and Sarah and many others, I do tip my hat to you as well. I also acknowledge I guess you'd call it still the current government, the outgoing government, and the opposition. And they're lending their support for this direction. You know, it was a joint direction under the RMA, Enabling Housing Supply Act, and the NPSUD. It was shared, and there might be different views now, but they put it in train. And I also want to probably stress David Parker got something very right here in the words, and around the purpose. Yes, we're aware of the need to provide sufficient capacity, etc., and make sure that we have a long-term strategic view. But there was the introduction of these words: achieve well-functioning living environments. And for me, they resonated strongly. And I am glad that we've been able to hook on to that purpose and actually address that in a real way. You know, plonking people in floodplains, as we have done in our planning instruments in the past, we will not be doing again. You know, I have to say, and I take some responsibility here, as a former planning committee chair, I think we all do, that the recent events, well, the events from earlier in the year have woken us up like never before to how powerful water is and how destructive it is. And the responsibility has been hinged home to me, and I know all of us, that we need to make sure that we do not any longer put people at risk by having high-level strategic documents that say it's okay to live here. You know, many of our residents have found themselves living in hazardous environments because they've been guided by our own strategic planning. Now, we're waking up to the fact that, and acknowledging that we didn't get that right, and we're starting to correct that, and you've got other work streams, Mr. Chair, underway, which will even strengthen that further. So I think that is a big win for us all and for Auckland in this FDS, in this future development strategy. And I commend us all for making sure that in the future, the very near future, we do actually become successful in making sure that the living environments that we create out of strategic documents are well functioning for our people and for place. It's not just for people, it's also for the place. It's also important for me that we don't continue to plonk people dislocated from communities that support them. I mean, allowing Auckland to sprawl, it comes with a massive mortgage in many ways, let alone the eternal motoring mortgage that it definitely comes with. This document doesn't go far enough for me on that. I would have probably, and I did, in the various work streams and the workshops, want to be pushing for a more condensed outcome, but I'm happy to support it as it is now. And when we come to review this, I understand it's another 3 years or something, I think we will see a further condensing of Auckland and the realisation of a great green space around Auckland supporting the urban environments. I want to just come back to the well-functioning living environments. This is only step one, and you've got other work streams in play. But the quality of the living environments is actually, that's come about through the MPSUD and earlier plans, it's questioned. A lot of people, like my colleague, Councillor Turner, is highlighting this concern about intensification. You know what? I don't hear it's about intensification per se. I think it's I'm hearing it's the quality of the built outcomes, and they're two different things. Many cities around the world have achieved intensification and they have achieved quality building. We have got a long way to go to achieve quality building. But it doesn't surprise me that you can go and design a place in multi-unit development in Auckland, and unlike the need to engage a professional engineer and a professional electrician, you don't need to provide a professional designer and an architect. You can get away with an architectural designer. And I think we've got a lot of problems in the design of our environment. And this is something we made pleas to in the RMA, Enabling Housing Supply Act, and we were rebuffed by the two major parties that were abreast of that. So in that area, I think we've got a way to go. Mayor, I mentioned earlier, Mayor, that we've got $7.5 million up to June in Council's response to the RMA and the MPSUD. I think one of the messages we've got to send to government is when you legislate on councils, not just this one and others, is show us the money to allow us to implement your legislation. I don't think we had any idea that we're going to be up for $7.5 million. And I'm not saying the outcomes are bad, but $7.5 million as of last June to implement the MPSUD and the RMA. We've got to talk to government about funding councils for their response to legislation. I'll leave it there.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
I just want to endorse a number of the previous speakers. My real concern is the government's foisted something on us that has wasted $7.5 million and arguably more than that. We've got a unitary plan that was largely fit for purpose, needed some tweaking, we could have tweaked it. And I've said this many times before, but all of these things that the government has foisted on us, the special housing areas and so on, have all just ended up in generating massive speculation across the property sector. So the price of land has gone up and everything has become more and more unaffordable. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about greenfield spaces or brownfield spaces. So I'm frankly, pretty disappointed with what has been a huge, largely waste of council resources. It's critical that the government listens and takes a more nuanced approach to planning across New Zealand. It isn't a one-size-fits-all, certainly when it comes to Auckland. And as others have said, it really comes down to the money, because none of this is sustainable if we don't have the funding for infrastructure and so on. And I do remain concerned that this particular plan is continuing to put housing in areas that are going to flood and in locations where houses will fall off cliffs. It's a little better, but not enough.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Sandra with an R or Sandra without the R. If you could just put the, it's right. I just want to show you, this is something that seems to be popping up all over Auckland. This one's in Prince Regent Road. As you can see, this is the size of a container. It's fully plumbed, and you can all the electrical and everything in there. Now, I don't know whether this is really the Auckland that we're really wanting. I've seen this sort of thing, and this is actually a good-looking one. There's one down in Freiburg, right on the floodplain, which is in pretty poor, it looks really, really terrible. But is this the future of Auckland? This is why I'm really concerned that we're actually allowing this sort of thing to happen. I've actually asked council officers if they can tell me, you have to excuse me, I've got a bit of a funny throat at the moment. I've asked council officers if they can tell me whether this is actually permitted, and this is the answer I got this morning from John Kennedy. This is an example of what is permitted under the medium density residential standards, MDRS, probably okay also under the unitary plan. So I'm just wondering, this is actually at the front of the street. It's very close to the road. Are we going to be allowing this sort of thing? Is this the Auckland we want? I can remember back in Manukau days with Sir Barry Curtis, we even had to plan the type of fence that we put on a property. But, you know, we just seem to be accepting anything. So if this is future development strategy and we're allowing this sort of thing to happen, I don't like it. And I'm sure most Aucklanders would not like this. So thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chair. I won't repeat my commendation of the process. I think the outcome is pragmatic, sensible in the circumstances, non-controversial, and happy to support it. I think there is another factor here that we are not taking into account when it comes to planning, and I think planning nowadays is something of a bit of a misnomer in the neoliberal paradigm where the market has a huge influence. And that missing factor is the variable of population. And that's why it is sensible and indeed essential to talk to the government on these matters. Somewhat more than the courtesy and diplomacy I think that Councillor Williamson was trying to achieve, but a discussion of the substantive matters around planning in Auckland and catering for the people of Auckland. And the reason why I mention it is the variable of population and immigration. In August, we had a record population increase of 110,000 net, was more than double that, but a lot of people left. But this variable and something that successive governments have engaged in, whatever their political stripe, and that is using immigration as a way of, if you like, modifying or making the economy look better in the short term. And we all know there are long-term costs which we and our ratepayers rather have to pay for. So I support the recommendations, but I think that we need and our planners need to give some thought to what we really mean by sustainable management, or whatever the new government, if it does, decides to replace that philosophy with, what it actually means when it comes to managing Auckland and catering for its population without all the negative effects that everyone around the room has named, which is an outcome of our failing to adequately meet the needs of the people of Auckland because of our infrastructure costs, because we are always dealing with an increasing population that has been encouraged for other reasons. And so these difficulties, I think we have to think very seriously about if we are going to have sustainable planning in the Auckland region on and throughout the 21st century. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. And I hope what is a short contribution to this, I just want to revisit, if I may, what has been a long and sorry history of interference by central government in Auckland, and where I said earlier today, it's about a lack of trust. It's not just one government, it's been successive governments. You know, if I think back to Nick Smith and the special housing areas, yes, that was going to advance things. Let's remember that we were being forced to do things, and let's remember Ihumātao. We would never have gotten to the pickle that we did in Ihumātao, but for the fact that we were told, oh no, we've got to do it, or the government's going to come in and whack our bottoms. I just think that it's been a very sorry chapter in New Zealand. And the reality is that I think most councillors around the table want the same things. They want transport-orientated developments, they want intensification, they want to preserve our green belts, they want these things. But as John Watson said, the way that we've gone about it is more like a flogged donkey than sort of charting our own course on this. And sometimes we should have pushed back a lot harder. So for me today to say, look, where's the harm in waiting a week or 2 weeks to get that dialogue going? We've been told that the government, the incoming government, will remove the requirements to adopt Plan Change 78, that is to reduce the interference. But where does that sit in the context of the other things that they're seeking to achieve? I'm very pleased that the Mayor's gone out with a manifesto. It's about time we get on the front foot and start putting a program for what Auckland really needs. But it's just been such a long and tortured process, you know, trying to argue about infrastructure, trying to argue about qualifying matters, and being told that you're locking people out of housing. That's not been the case at all. It's just that we haven't had the maturity to have a sensible debate. I support much of the really good work that has gone into what we are wanting to see. You know, that the issue around flood-prone areas, there's a lot of really good in it today, and that's why I despair that we're rushing it. Why can we not just take a breath? There is nothing to prevent us. I mean, we've voted it down, so I'll let it go now. But we do need to have a better relationship with central government. We do need to stop confusing Aucklanders who really, I think, have lost all hope around our planning abilities. And it's not our fault. It's what successive governments have dealt out. And there needs to be a much less complicated communication to the people of Auckland of what we are trying to do, and recognition that, as Councillor Watson said, even with what we are looking to give effect to today, it actually doesn't get rid of the issue of affordability for many, many, many Aucklanders. And that's where we need to be sitting down and really coming to grips with. So thank you to all of those who have contributed on this. I do think it's lamentable that we can't just, in the interest of common sense, just wait to see what the incoming government can work with us on, with the Mayor's manifesto and everything else besides. And it's a shame. It just makes me really sad. And if I can conclude on saying to Councillor Henderson, you think you've had it tough over the last 10 years on this. For those of us who have been pushing public transport and infill and densification, if you like, for the last 30 years, you've got another 20 to go on exercising patience. We need to come together on this. No one individual councillor, nobody can claim a monopoly on good ideas. It's about how we do it effectively together, and more importantly, how we give effect to change, because that's what council is not good at.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you very much. Councillor Leone.
Look, I'm just going to make mine brief, but I definitely support what's in front of us here, and I just want to agree with Councillor Darby's comments around the fact that we do need that support of central government going forward. If they are going to make these changes, then we do need the finances to go with it. I also just wanted to add, in terms of the intensification, you know, I was really clear when I stood that I'm in full support of us moving towards having a 15-minute city and having all the supports in place that have been consulted on for a very long time, it seems. Just in addition to my own experience around intensification, I have lived in London before, which has got 11 million people in one city, and living in apartments is actually quite a really great thing that I have experienced with my own twins, raising my family. So intensification for me has been really positive, having neighbours that are supportive, having shared spaces, all of these things I think is the future of Tamaki Makaurau, and normalising this, which will be a big change. But no, just tautoko what's going forward. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you very much. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I wanted to tautoko what Councillor Henderson said about the ongoing housing crisis that we've had for many years. I thought he put it really well. And I guess, you know, we have a real dichotomy in our city between, you know, people who may own 3 homes versus those who have experience living in cars. And I think he outlined that really well, and I just wanted to bring that to the table when we're talking about, you know, people's level of frustration. This has a real impact on people's lives. I will be supporting the future development strategy as proposed because I think it heads in a good direction for density done well. In particular, I'm encouraged that it starts to draw some good lines against sprawl, and I want to acknowledge Dr. Sarah Bickerton, who has tweeted at me for some time about learning in this space and has really prompted me to think. I commend to my colleagues a link on YouTube called Suburbia is Subsidised, which was put together by Urban 3. We actually had someone from Urban 3 come and do an Auckland Conversations talk back in 2016 that talked more about those ideas, and it does include Auckland in terms of some of the data that they've looked at around the costs to council, to central governments of supporting sprawl, and will surprise nobody who's used to hearing me rant about it, that sprawl is more expensive than density done well, building around a city centre and town centres. One of the things that Sarah challenged me on and was a bit of an aha moment for me is how we have in this city often built a lot of 3-bedroom homes and tried to make everybody fit into a 3-bedroom home regardless of their age or stage of life. And that's certainly been my experience. I live in a 3-bedroom home. But I lived in a 3-bedroom home when there were only 2 of us. And I lived in a 3-bedroom home with my parents when I was 22. And there were only 3 of us, and really I probably should have moved out at least 2 years earlier. And I live in a 3-bedroom home now with 5 people in it, and we try to make that work. There are people living in 3-bedroom homes who have 3 families in them, and we should not forget that. So as we approve documents like this, we encourage the market and we encourage social housing developers as well. We enable Māori to move towards housing models that are not just more 3-bedroom homes on, 1/8 acre sections where we've infilled. We're enabling a whole lot of other types of housing, and I think that's great. That will help with housing affordability. And I know we've had some discussion today that supply doesn't have an impact on housing affordability, but actually, while housing affordability is incredibly complex, I actually spent a few days in July going to a course on urban economics, which was run by Stuart Donovan and Dr. Shane Martin, who used to be Auckland Council's economist, in fact. And what I learnt from that is that while it is complicated and there are a lot of factors, supply definitely does make housing more affordable. You have to ask a whole lot of other questions. Where is it? What kind of housing do you need? All of that kind of stuff. But on the whole, and I will just quote for you or mention for you 4 studies that show this clearly. A long-run model of housing affordability from 2011, Supply Scepticism, Housing Supply and Affordability from 2018, citywide effects of new housing supply, evidence from moving chains, and 2023's local effects of large new apartment buildings in, oh, I've cut the end off there, but I can send people the link if they want to. So the evidence is actually very clear. And I am really proud to be supporting this document and looking forward to how we can move forward in this space even more. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. And the Mayor, sorry, Councillor Foley, and then the Mayor.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. I just want to tautoko things that everybody have said today, and especially yourself, Chair, and I want to thank you and the Deputy as well for all of the work that you've put in. Of course, our staff as well, Jacques and the team, have done an amazing job on this, and I thank you for that as well. I'm really mindful of, I cast my mind back to the floods and the cyclone and the devastation that we saw in our city and in other parts of New Zealand too. And after the dust had settled, a lot of people started to turn on their councils and actually point the finger at past councils and past council decisions and blame councils and say, why did they ever let them build in those places? Why did they ever let them put houses in harm's way? And so I'm really mindful of the comment that Councillor Darby made, how we were shocked by the floods in Auckland and how we were shocked into reality. We can't deny anymore that the climate crisis is real and the impacts that the climate will have and continues to have on our community. And also that we can't allow that to happen any further. And so I really tautoko the sentiments that were shared by Councillor Darby. And although the FDS is not perfect and it doesn't go as far as many of us would like, but it is a step in the right direction. And so for that reason, I will be supporting it, Chair. It's a step in the right direction for us to plan better for our city, to enable development to happen in a better way, and to inform us as well in our decision making. That's also why I didn't support delaying it, because we have big decisions to face in the LTP process around infrastructure, around investment in our city, around building up our town centres, and the FDS will inform those decisions. And I'm afraid that if we waited a month, 2 months, who knows how long, that we would have missed out on having that really vital information for us to inform our decision making. And so I just want to leave it there, Chair. A lot's been said today, and I'm very happy to support this kaupapa. Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, look, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but I've been listening to some of the words that have been spoken now and obviously some of the unfortunate remarks expressed earlier. But I have to say that, and whilst you know what I noted in the secretarial note with respect to Takanini, it is reasonable to suggest that part of the problem with planning is that you plan to an extent with the consent of your constituents, because this is a process whereby people in a liberal democracy feel a sense of expectation, and I believe that they are right in expecting this, that they will be able to challenge the merits of development outcomes that affect them. And if you don't think that people get frustrated, get angry, get concerned, if you don't think they respond, think about the consequences for Helen White. We had Megan Woods writing to us just before the election, indicating that she was, as Minister, wanting to take a course of action with respect to the light rail corridor, a really, really intensification-centric process with Kāinga Ora. And Councillor Fletcher affecting to me about what the public reaction was in Balmoral. And think about why Helen White is currently teetering 106 votes in front, apparently, in Mount Albert, 20,000 vote majority extinguished in 3 years. Think about the concerns that have been expressed by other Aucklanders in other communities who have done things that were not expected a few weeks back, but in fact probably need to be recognised for what they were. a loss of social license from our community who believe that politicians, whether they be central government ministers, MPs, councillors who are sitting in very comfortable multi-million-dollar homes in the outer suburbs who are not affected by these decisions, that we become estranged from the consequences of development outcomes that people don't like. And so that's why you get a degree of reaction that you do. And it's not because people are just misinformed. It's because people are bloody angry that they no longer have the ability to challenge the merits of development outcomes that affect them. I think that it's entirely reasonable for us to reflect on the fact that the National Policy Statement on Urban Development is what it is. It's an attempt by ministers to strong-arm council into doing certain things that perhaps we don't want to do. The reality is, Chair, possibly the most salient resolutions that we will pass will be the noting ones, regardless of what this future development strategy says. And I do support it for the large part, not entirely, but in general, I support this. But this will not prevent private plan changes from being accepted and considered and adopted. The truth of the matter is that the government and council don't fund the infrastructure that addresses the consequences of that, and developers consistently try to socialise the cost of development, and the community gets pissed off. And that's why people like Deborah Russell and others are going to lose their seats, because people at the edges of Auckland who have to sustain the greenfields don't like it, because the pressure puts on the crumbling infrastructure. And that's why people like Helen White are struggling to hold Mount Talbot. This is a debate. This is a debate around what is acceptable. What is acceptable in a planning context, and what our community will consent to. And if you think that things have been settled now, I don't think they have. I think this debate will continue, and I think that the plan change applications will continue, and that we will not be able to hang on to the grist of this future development strategy to the extent that it doesn't align with the plan change applications, which will undoubtedly try to push the envelope into greenfields developments. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Mayor Brown.
Thanks very much. I've had a long life of not liking planners and not liking plans much either, because I am an experienced developer and have developed large numbers of sections in both green and brownfields developments. Nevertheless, I find myself that I'm going to support this. No plan is ever fully right or fully wrong, but at least it is our plan. Even the plan that we had before government started meddling with the MDRSs, which sounds like a type of disease or floorboard, but even before they meddled, it wasn't too bad. You don't have a good plans, you have plans that aren't too bad is a good plan. And this basically protects farmland. It supports growth within our city limits where existing infrastructure is not fully used. Auckland's sprawled out far too far anyhow. It guides developers away from floodable areas. These are all sensible things. There are plenty of house sites in Auckland of all types, from apartments, I live in an apartment now, and to units, to the old quarter-acre section. I've lived in those as well. And there's nothing wrong with apartments. I can afford whatever I choice, but that's where I am at the moment because it seems good. It's been this has been well supported by submitters and 20 local boards. I know that some of my councillors have come under pressure from some self-interested speculators on farmland. Well, I just have to learn to resist that. That's not a good thing. Just to say no. I've heard them say that brownfields is more expensive than greenfields. It depends on who's paying. If you add all the costs together, they're both the same. I can tell you this, having done brownfields and greenfields, there's no difference in affordability. As a developer, you sell at the best market price you can get, and regardless of what you got away, it just all those rules are effective how big or small your profit is. We have to be able to resist the self-interest of some who act in their own self-interest. We've got to act in the favour of all ratepayers. And make no mistake, voting against this will mean ratepayers will pay more, merely to subsidise those people who've got a way of paying less. And as a developer, you see, what can I get away with? That's what you try and do. So we've got to remember. The last two paragraphs allow developers to still carry on doing things like beachlands. I actually quite like beachlands. It's not a bad one because as long as we don't not mugs to fix the road coming in, they have enough land out there for local jobs. Force them to be local. Don't fix the road. And it is a golf course anyhow. It's not good farmland. It's a shitty old golf course. So I think Councillor Lee raised something or other which we forget a lot here, is that the person who has the most impact on house availability in Auckland is the Minister of Immigration. We need about 5 years of no immigration because the population here is shot ahead of our ability to pay for and provide infrastructure. So that's another issue that thanks for reminding me, Councillor Lee. I'll sit down with him as well and say, justify this. Just because a few restaurateurs won't pay full wages is not a reason to bring a whole lot of people who haven't got a house. And Sharon Stewart raised two pictures of hideous development, which in fact was a direct result of MDRS. So it is a disease. I don't like that anymore. We need to plan Auckland how we want it planned. That came from outside. So it's not perfect. I find myself, I never thought I'd live to support a plan, but I'm going to do that today because I think it's the right thing to do. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for that.
Kia ora. Thanks, Mayor. Thank you all for your impassioned contributions. I really, really appreciate everyone giving their point of view. I think to Councillor Stewart's photos, we will look into that, where that came from. But as far as I could tell, that type of development has been, was the changes of the Building Act under 2016, which allowed single detached buildings or sleep outs that size. So that's another thing. Yes, governments tell us what to do and we have to implement that. I don't believe that looks like an MDRS related thing, but we will look into it. The MPSUD, it did get sped up and it did get a lot of changes that we weren't a part of. Chris Darby and others were part of those conversations for a long time. Suddenly it went quiet, and then we had the press conference with Judith Collins and Megan Wood at the time. That dramatically changed and pushed forward what were some good changes, but what were some changes we weren't expecting. And I think Judith Collins said at the time, this is needed to get housing for people urgently, and this is why they supported a bipartisan approach to that. We are sitting under that this is a legal requirement, but I think it's also important for us at this point of the super city to have another go at the future development of our city. I think, you know, I grew up on what people would call infill housing. We never had a garden or a lawn, but growing up early 2000s, I didn't notice that was a problem because we were lucky enough to live in walking distance of a bus, walking distance of the school, walking distance of many parks that people have put there, councils have put there in the past. So this is for the next generation. I think that, you know, there's an argument of what affordability is, but you can look through for the sale signs across Onehunga, Northcote, Avondale, Mount Roskill. There is Birkenhead of houses well under the median house price, apartments well under the median house price in Auckland. So there are more options for people. We're not forcing anyone to live in any type or style of housing. We're just providing options. This will continue to do that. But I think if we're voting today, we're thinking about the future, but already thinking about removing the hazards that we are putting people in, because we are now buying people's houses that we put those people in hazards in the past. So, right, we've asked for a division on this. So Sandra will go through that. But thank you very much again to everyone for this debate.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you're voting on the motion which is on the screen. Chair Hills.
Aye.
IMSB Member Ashby.
Aye.
Councillor Baker.
Aye.
Councillor Bartley.
Aye.
Mayor Brown. Deputy Chair Dalton.
Aye.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Ferry.
In favour.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
Abstain.
Councillor Fooley.
Aye.
IMSB member Hanare.
Aye.
Councillor Henderson.
Yes.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Leone.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
In favour, but if you could note my secretarial note, please.